Hey there, truth seekers. I'm Larry Litton, your guide through the maze of modern politics and power dynamics on liberty, leadership, and lies. Each episode will challenge the narratives, expose the lies, and celebrate the leaders who champion true liberty. Get ready to question, learn, and maybe even change your mind. So let's dive into the truth together. Welcome to this week's episode. This one will be a sort of a one-off episode, as I will be having a guest with what appears to be a bit of an axe to grind with President Trump's nominee to head the Department of Health and Human Services, Mr. RFK Jr., which the Senate did confirm around noon last Thursday. If you listened to last week's episode, you know that today's guest, he reached out to me based upon some Google recommendations of conservative podcasts and also on the recommendations of some of his personal contacts on LinkedIn. This young man, Mr. Kadin McElwain, he is an autistic college student, a writer, and an activist on a mission to raise as much awareness about autism as possible. Now, with the recent elevation of the subject of autism and the possible causes of it, coupled with the televised hearings in the Senate of RFK Jr. and his nomination, I thought it important to bring this young man on the show. During his life, his capabilities were questioned because of who he was or is, but according to him, thanks to a supportive set of parents, he proved those naysayers wrong. We're going to chat with him today, and regardless of what is said, we should always cheer those people that overcome the obstacles in their lives, much as Kadin is doing right now today. With that being said, right after the podcast intro, we're going to dive right into the interview. So with that, let's take a stand in the arena with Kadin McElwain this week, folks, and get on with the show. Welcome to Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, the podcast where we unravel the complex web of politics, power, and deception. Each week, we dive into the stories behind the headlines, exploring how liberty is eroded and the selfishness of our political leaders, as well as the lies that shape our world. Join us as we dissect the truth from fiction by examining the tactics used by the new aristocracy, the political class, at the local, state, and national levels of government as we dare to challenge the status quo. Get ready for thought-provoking discussions, exclusive interviews, and a journey into the heart of what really drives our society. Liberty, Leadership, and Lies, where your understanding of the world begins to change. Tune in every Monday morning and prepare to see beyond the veil. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the podcast, where we got a nice young man. He reached out to ask that he could come on here and we could debunk or talk about some of the myths, lies, and anything surrounding what's going on with autism today. His name is Kadin McElwain. He lives in Ohio. We got a little bit of a Tennessee connection there. He lived in Nashville, right, Kadin?
Yes, sir.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about autism, and specifically we're going to dive into some of the RFK's statements, since his confirmation hearings are going on right now. And by the time this podcast is released, it'll probably be, the confirmation will be over with. But we just want to get this out there in the open and have this frank, open discussion. And so right now I'm going to let Kadin go ahead and give a little bit of his background and introduce himself to the audience. So Kadin, take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I was diagnosed with autism at 2 years old, and during that time period, due to the social stigmas surrounding autism, my capabilities of living an adult life were questioned. But thanks to a very supportive set of parents and a strong work ethic on my end, I was able to prove those people wrong, graduate high school early during the pandemic, while working 2 jobs consecutively online. And I'm now a junior at college at Kent State University with 5 consecutive dean's lists, going on number 6. And I've used my story to advocate for more awareness about autism.
Well, good deal. So my wife, when she was in the workforce back when I was on active duty in Virginia Beach, she worked for a doctor who really specialized with autistic patients. His son was born or has autism. He's a very productive young man like yourself. He's in college. I think he's graduated by now. years go by after you retired. But so autism and the pressures around it deeply affect me and my wife, and we're very concerned with it, and we like to reach out. So that's why I definitely agreed to do this podcast, but with Caden here. So, Caden, let's get right into the meat of it. Can you explain your stance on the relationship between vaccines and autism, especially in light of the current scientific talks about it?
Well, I would say vaccines don't cause autism. That conspiracy theory has been around for years now, way before my time. I think it's more so genetics that cause autism, with maybe some of the ingredients in our food.
So, definitely environmental impacts definitely can affect human growth, human development. But I believe myself that some of the ingredients in vaccines are just like some of the ingredients in our food today that can have adverse effects. Because I look back and I see, like in the 1970s, the rates of autism were about one in 2,000 to one in 10,000, and that's just 55 years ago now. And today, or around 2020, it's now about one in 36. Do you think that could be directly or only attributed to the environmental impacts of what's in our foods?
I absolutely think so. Back in your day, there were probably like four ingredients, maybe five, in a fast food burger from McDonald's. Nowadays, there's 26 to 30 ingredients, some of it extremely bad for us, all because the company wants to save time and energy in distributing the product.
Okay, definitely, I could see that. So, based upon that, yeah, what do you make of the extensive research that has shown that there are no links, and then the research that does show links? How do you compare the two, and which one do you think? How do you determine that which study is more scientifically robust?
I would honestly compare the two studies, see
Uh-huh.
what was the variables they considered, who did they test it on, and see if it's from a trusted source. Because there's one paper in particular that Robert Kennedy Jr. cited in his previous comments before the hearing that was criticized for being extremely flawed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can all get duped by flawed research, and I always encourage people to look not only into the study's questions, the study's methodology, but I like to look into who's funding the study, because really the money will tell you which way the study is going to come out. What the bias in the study is going to be based upon who is funding the study. Would you agree to that?
I absolutely would.
Okay. So now let's what do you think is the biggest misinformation about vaccines and autism? What's the biggest one
I would
that we can easily debunk?
I would say not related to that specifically, but autism in general. RFK Jr.'s comment about autism being completely non-existent back in his day, that we can easily debunk because those people were honestly either misdiagnosed or institutionalized back in that day.
I can see that for sure. I disagreed with that part of his thing because there are a lot of differences in the way people are treated nowadays. There were institutions and they were people institutionalized for all kinds of things that nobody had a clear understanding of what they were. I mean, look at back to the Salem witch trials. Those people probably, those young ladies or girls could have been autistic or epilepsy or something else, which caused people to burn them at the stake, right?
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about your background, your fight. I mean, what do you think? Besides, I know you mentioned your parents being hugely supportive in your work ethic, but what about the community around you? I mean, did you get a huge amount of support from the community that your family decided to embed you with?
I absolutely did. Specifically, my teachers. I had very close relationships with all of them in grade school and high school. I do still, but the problem with that was one time in middle school, my IEP, individualized education plan, was cut completely because the school misunderstood exactly what autism was and thought because I was doing well academically, I didn't need that anymore. This was when I was living in Tennessee, in Rutherford County, to be exact. And when my parents asked about that, the school suggested they put me in a robotics camp for the summer instead. And I'm grateful for my parents for this. They fought hard to get that back, writing to every single autism organization in Tennessee and a state senator. And I was able to get that implemented again in high school.
Okay. So was it a public school or
It was a public school. I'll keep him anonymous out of respect,
right?
because I did have some really good people that helped me there. But what the school sort of understood is autism isn't necessarily academic struggles. It's mainly social, emotional, and communication struggles.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree. I have a family member that's on the spectrum as well, Asperger's, severe Asperger's. He's close to my age, yet he's still homebound with his parents, my aunt and uncle. But let's get back in a little bit about RFK. Do you think, I'm disregarding his statements that there was no autism back in the day, right? Not back in my days, back in his day. He's much older than me, by the way. But anyway, uh, and you mentioned that there's stuff in our foods now, and then the stuff that is in the vaccines. Do you think that there is maybe the possibility of a correlation between the ingredients in the vaccines that have nothing to do with the actual disease itself, the transmission effects or whatever it is, like mercury's in vaccines and all that stuff? There are ingredients in our food which are definitely unhealthy now. We are a much fatter nation. We are a much more unhealthy nation because of our food system. But those are some ingredients that also can be found, or similar ones that are in these vaccines. Do you think there might be a correlation that some part of some of the vaccines are detrimental? I mean, specifically, we'll go back to, like you referenced, again, you picked on me about my age. So back in my day, there wasn't the number of vaccines required. I think I had like five required before when I had to go into a public school. And now there's like 83 vaccines on the schedule for children 5 and under. What do you think? Could there be some possibility of a correlation there?
I still highly doubt it, but I also think that no one needs 83 vaccinations to be able to function in society. I really don't think that's necessary. I think that it's possible that the vaccines might cause other ailments, but not autism. I highly doubt it. And I'll also add RFK called autism a tragedy. To me, I don't think he has the right to say that when his own family didn't do a good job helping out Rosemary Kennedy. If you remember her, she was most likely on the spectrum, and Joseph Kennedy Sr. ended up lobotomizing her, institutionalizing her, and causing her to die with only 3 family members with her just so he could protect the Kennedy family image. I find that very hypocritical of RFK Jr.
Well, I think that he was referring to that treatment of Rosemary was a tragedy just because she probably would. I think when he says it's a tragedy, it's the treatment of people with autism that is the tragedy. I mean, people, we have different learning, we have different social emotional skills. Everybody does, right? Not everybody's as gregarious as the next guy, and there are severe introverts, there are severe extroverts. We have we have a lot of different personalities on it, and the way people are treated or society treats people that are different, that in itself is a tragedy, wouldn't you think?
I absolutely agree, especially under the new administration had centered around hate. To me, I think Trump means well, and he did pass some bills I somewhat agree with, but the way he and his friends approach things and word things is absurd to me.
Have you ever heard of Saul Alinsky's book, The Rules for Radicals?
Hmm. I haven't heard of it. I might have heard of Saul Alinsky.
Yeah, he's got this rules for radicals and how they treat their political opponents. And one of the most effective tools, which has been quite effectively used by those that fall on the, let's say, the left side of the political spectrum, has been one that's called ridicule. You ridicule your opponents and it gets them to change their behavior. And the left has been very effective on that. And specifically with the calling of anybody that opposes them as a fascist, right? Or a Nazi, right? That used to be one of the worst things that you could call somebody, racist, fascist, or Nazis, right? So it's a little bit of a flip of the script, and it may not be uh, well, I can't get into President Trump's head, but it may be his way of effectively deflecting. Hey, I'm a Nazi, I'm a racist, I'm a fascist. Let's call little hands or little hands Marco or something like that to belittle because it's just a political strategy to mock your opponent to knock them off their game. It's not mocking them to mock some aspect of them. It's to knock them off their game. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, we've had so much. Everybody on both sides of the political spectrum calls each other's names. I think it's now to the point where it's just like first graders out on the playground call me a racist. It's the same thing as calling me like a boogerhead. It has no meaning anymore. It's a word applied so somebody else can feel bigger or better about themselves. So I don't even get into the name calling or whatever that anymore. I get down to the fundamentals of is it constitutional? And if it's not constitutional, it has to be done away with.
Yep, that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. So during his hearing, has he said RFK said anything specifically during his hearings that you've taken issue with? I haven't. I got to tell you the truth. I haven't watched much of the hearings. I don't have cable TV. I don't do any of that. And I don't watch videos. I read. I read transcripts, and that's because videos will always have somebody else's interjection of their bias into it, be it right or left or center. I just like to read the transcripts to see how those, if I heard those words directly spoken to me, how they would make me feel. So that's typically how I get my news. I'll get transcripts. But I haven't followed these hearings. I haven't followed any of these hearings very well because it's just, it's too much. I mean, there's so much going on right now in the first 3 weeks of President Trump's presidency. You just can't follow everything. It's happening at lightning speed.
I absolutely agree. I haven't heard RFK Jr. say anything specifically during those trials, but he more so refused to take back his previous comments, which I find absurd. If he gets sworn into this position, and he still has a chance to fix his mistake. His family has been trying to fix their mess with Rosemary for decades now with her work for the disabled community. I think what RFK Jr. could do is plan an autism awareness conference or hearing within the set and get the top autism experts, Temple Grandin, maybe Elon Musk. He's on the spectrum but there are some aspects of him I have an issue with.
Mhm.
And anyone who's an expert on autism, and let their voices be heard, and let them propose the legislation that needs to be passed to help further research and further resources.
I agree that the issues of autism should be studied. What triggers, what causes it, if there's environmental or whatever is underlying the exponential growth in the diagnosis. We need to look into, was it because of poor diagnoses in the past? Which I find kind of hard to believe, going from 1 in 12,000 to 1 in 37 in just 50 years. I don't know if that's just being misdiagnosed. There's definitely something else, a causal factor that we should look into discovering what that causal factor or factors are and mitigate those. And I think his work on specifically our food system, uh, what we eat in our country, is going to go a long way towards what they call MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. It all starts with what we put into our bodies.
I absolutely agree with that. And I've been trying to improve on my diet myself this past year, especially with Rockstar energy drinks and
Oh my
monsters and
goodness.
Red Bull. Those posts are horrible for you. I used to have those every day, 5 a day, 6 a day at most. The most I've ever had was 11 a day. Now at most I have like one a month, 2 a month maybe.
Wow, I had a young sailor on my last ship. So this was back on my last deployment. So we're talking 2013, so 12 years ago. He was a very young sailor, but he had discovered Monster energy drinks, and he was 18, and halfway through that 9 month deployment, we had to medically evacuate him for heart conditions because of Monster energy drinks. He didn't drink water, coffee, or anything. He just Monster energy drinks all day long. And I don't think that at 18 years old is gonna. I don't think that at any age is healthy for you. So we had to transfer him off the ship in the middle of a deployment in the middle of the Persian Gulf, and it puts the ship at risk, but B, that young man's heart is now damaged from the chemicals that are in Monster energy drinks, if that's the only thing he was drinking. Well, it turns out it was. But yeah, the things we put into our body directly affect our health.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. So let's talk about your personal experiences. You talked a little bit about your education, and hooray for those teachers that do the right thing for their students, that are really looking out for you. The I think the public education model is completely broken, especially with it's not so individualized. Me personally, next week's or the episode prior to this one is a younger than me homeschooling mom. I think that that's that's the way our founding fathers were actually brought up. And look at the country they gave us because of that classical type of education. So I think, and that's a much more personal style of education, right? If your mom and dad are doing it all instead of one teacher with 40 kids, there's not much individualized attention that can happen there. But hooray for those teachers that definitely looked out for you. But how do those personal experiences influence your views on these behaviors? Was anybody in your past growing up directly impact the way you view what's going on today?
I would say mainly the what's going on in school systems has impacted my perspective on what we need to do for the autism community, because those systems, like you said, especially special education, is completely broken, and our tax dollars are going towards that. And to honest, especially if we eliminate the proof farm and just go off of what you're diagnosed with immediately, that initial proof of diagnosis,
Mhm.
it's a be common knowledge that maybe this one student will need X, Y, and Z resources. Maybe this other student will need X, Y, and Z resource. And I would also say college education, in a sense, is broken too, because students are paying hundreds upon thousands of dollars to become political activists instead of focusing on what really matters, which is education. I'm a guy who takes this education extremely seriously. So I think where more funding needs to be prioritized is not necessarily some of these political programs, but in the special education system.
Or not into high cost degrees for that won't pan out in the future, right? You know, the $250,000 a year degree in underwater basket weaving is not going to get you anywhere. It may help you protest on a campus somewhere against some policy, but it's not going to do you well in life and to pay back that loan. So if you don't mind me asking, what's your career field or your college study field in? What's your discipline?
I'm a communications major currently. There were a bunch of different majors I went through before settling on this one. I wanted something that could get me a job where I could pay my bills, pay down those student loans, and pay for my food, and where I don't have to worry about where my meals are going to come from ever again. And I'm actually working to try to pay down some of the loans now so I can live my life sooner. What a lot of students misunderstand about college is that it's free money, especially with loans. They misunderstand that it's free money where they can go party, protest, and skirt their steps because they know they're still going to get in because they have a football scholarship. When once those 4 years are up, I can't wait to see a look on a lot of my generation's faces, the TikTok generation, and that's what I like to call them, when they see reality kick in, that they have a big fat bill, well, after graduation, that they're gonna have to pay back.
Absolutely. Well, good luck in the communications field. That's the degree my daughter, or that's the degree field she studied when she graduated and got her degree in communications and marketing, and now she's working in exactly that field here in East Tennessee and doing quite well with it. So there's many opportunities in that. So now, what do you think? What legislative measures could be implemented going forward with a Robert F. Kennedy as the director of, Secretary of Health and Human Services. Now, remember that they don't pass legislation, but he could propose legislation. What would you like to see come out of the Department of Health and Human Services going forward?
Well, firstly, I want him to take responsibility for his reckless comments about autism, or at least explain the context behind them. I think that's important. In the sense of legislation, I would say the number one priority should definitely be the ingredients in our food and banning some of these dyes and everything else, and getting back to the 4 ingredient burger and the 5 ingredient cake and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think that is one of his priorities is the food that we eat. I mean, he says he doesn't mind if you eat a McDonald's burger, but let's try to make those McDonald's burgers or whatever fast food burgers healthier. Don't put all that junk in that because again, like anything you put in your body has a direct effect on your quality of life.
I absolutely agree. I was born in 2004, which I think was around the time Super Size Me came out. So that was right in the middle of when health discussions were beginning to be had again.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, how can you uh, get your community leaders and the public figures to better engage? Have you done anything specifically? I mean, you reached out to come on this podcast, and I'm more than happy to share your message of what we have to do as a country to get healthier again, to find out what's causing this. But specifically, what are you besides reaching out to podcasts? I know you've done several interviews. Have you engaged with your elected officials?
I absolutely have, especially on the local level. One person I regularly partner with on a lot of these autism awareness functions is Treasurer Michael Zurin of my county. He runs an organization called the Lake County Special Needs Birthday Club, and I'm regularly fundraising for them. And I actually have another event in April that I'll be hosting, a special education forum at Lake Erie College in Painesville, Ohio. Oh, so there's that. And I just emailed my commissioners of the county to allow them to proclaim April as Autism Awareness Month in the county.
Okay, good. Yeah, it is. It's important that we, and I say this on my podcast, so we have to be participants in our system of self-governance because apathy has got us to where we are now, where we have a leviathan as a government that doesn't really care about us other than us fueling their spending activity. That's the only reason why the government cares about any of us right now is our taxes. Have you thought about starting your own podcast?
I have a couple of times. First, I gotta get my degree, then I'll look into it.
Yeah, because I think you can be a forerunner in or a leader within the community by getting like-minded, people that have the same challenges as you and get into like a public forum and start talking about it and then sharing the message to raise awareness. I mean, nothing will raise awareness more than a video smacking their face. You know what I'm saying? It's and podcasts they're free. Nobody has to subscribe or pay to them to watch them, and it's a good and effective way to get your message out there.
I absolutely agree.
Mm. Sweet. So, what do you plan on? When are you supposed to graduate?
I graduate in May of 2026.
Oh, so one more year, a little bit more than a year. You looking forward to it?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Good, good. So you think you're going to stay in Ohio?
Yeah, I absolutely think so.
Yeah, why is that? It's in the middle of the Rust Belt.
Yeah, I've built a life here. I got several connections here, both socially and professionally. So it's honestly the perfect place for me.
Oh, good deal, good deal. Is there anything you would like my audience, to know?
I always share this piece of advice with parents.
Mhm.
If you have a child with autism, push them as hard as you can and don't take no for an answer and don't take any unsolicited medical advice from people. If people can't see the potential in your child, don't give them the time of day. Everyone's missing out on an amazing person.
Absolutely. Our children are gifts from God. They're a responsibility. God gives parents the ultimate responsibility to raise that child. So, I mean, it's a huge responsibility to raise children, and I gotta say I'm proud of what you're doing, what you're accomplishing, and what the effort you are putting into getting your message out there. I'm really proud of you for doing that, and I'd like to hear more about you going into the future and keep in touch with the show.
Thank you, sir.
And again, I'll let you know when this episode is going to be released. It's a pleasure having you on, and as more comes up, if you get new developments and you'd like to share them with my audience, by all means, you're more than welcome to come on the program again, sir.
All right, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kane. You have a great and wonderful night.
Thanks, you as well.
Bye. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed listening to this courageous and driven young man. I also hope that despite his misgivings, as well as the misgivings of those on the right and left sides of the political spectrum, that Secretary Kennedy does exactly as he and President Trump promised to do while on the campaign trail, and that is to make America healthy again. I'm not a scientist, but like Caden, I do believe that what we are putting into our bodies is directly correlated to the rise in autism in our country. Where we differ, and I think that is obvious after talking with him, is what specifically that we are putting in our bodies is the causal factor. It's my belief it isn't just food, ladies and gentlemen. It is our food and our drinking water, and many of the medications our government forces us to take, and often before we're even 5 years old. Now, though, let's get on to the big national scene, and the last big chess piece that's on the board to get confirmation is Kash Patel. He, I believe, will be a tremendous asset in the rooting out of the left wing political bias that has completely embedded itself into what used to be the premier law enforcement agency on the planet. Now, the work in the FBI is going to be just as important to the people as RFK's work will be in Health and Human Services. Now, for local stuff, I went to that Blue Zone meeting last week, and it appears to me exactly what I thought it would be. And I'll explain more on that next week. And I'll talk also about a city of Sevierville being selective in their code enforcements once again. But apparently, a Camping World put in a location right near exit 407 on I-40, and they started flying one of their iconic, huge American flags on a really tall flagpole. But, and this is just me thinking out loud here, folks, and based upon my personal experience with the quote unquote powers that be here in Sevier County, well, the owner of Camping World, he ain't from around here, and he doesn't have the right last name. So the city has decided to enforce their code that restricts the height and size of flags within the city limits. Now they're within like 200 yards of being outside the city limits. Anyway, it was quite a different story when an elected member of the county school board asked for a variance on a code restriction a few months ago. I would also like to let the audience know that I have some more guests lined up for the coming weeks. We'll be talking more about the scam that has been successfully labeled school choice all over the country and some of the efforts here in Tennessee to push back on the encroachment. As well, we'll be talking with another guest about Republican Party politics. He was a big mover and shaker in Republican Party politics in Florida, and he's authored a book, and he was a former director of the state GOP there. I also want to remind my fellow Republicans here in Sevier County that our county GOP has set the date for their biannual reorganization meeting. It is set for the 25th of March. As of the reading or recording of this episode, there still isn't a time yet that date set. We can, however, safely assume that the Good Old Boy Network will set the time for around noon on that day, just so it can coincide with the lunch break and have the meeting in the county courthouse complex so they can have all the usual suspects come in to either keep the current people in their positions or just shuffle them among the positions. That is why I want to urge each of you in Sevier County that listens to this show to make plans to take that day off and show up so you can vote on who best represents Republican Party principles to run our county GOP organization. And we don't have to continue with the same old, same old. This week's wisdom from God's word comes to us from the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 21. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Ladies and gentlemen, God, our Creator, uses His creation to accomplish a great many things on this side of heaven. In order to use us, though, we have to be willing to be used and not let our apathy continue us all down the same path. Because God will allow our apathy to use us as well. If you want more of the same, selective code enforcement against people who ain't from around here, or for our elected officials to invite in an organization that's funded by healthcare insurance agencies and partners with the CDC to dictate what you can or cannot eat out in a restaurant, as well as to waste tax dollars on projects that benefit a select few instead of the public as a whole, well, keep sitting on the sidelines and Let the good old boys keep good old boying. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a stand in the arena together. Reveille, it's time to wake up.